This also is in relation to the Shimla Agreement. In 1971 war, we had a military victory, but we had a political loss.
Absolutely. Now, during the Shimla agreement, there was no military representative sitting during the discussions. And this is something which the military leadership has always resented. That why was one of our representative not there? It was certainly a political, the give and take was all politics. Otherwise, if there was a military rep, they would have never agreed to return the territory, the captured territory. So, yes, I agree. But then, at the end of the day, like I said earlier, right in the beginning, wars are fought for political goals. And our political leadership has those goals in mind, and the military becomes secondary over there.
So the next session for today is Missing in Action, and it is written by Chandra Sutta Dograman. So this book specifically talks about the heroes or the people who were lost after the war. So we are going to hear a lot about this particular book, and the moderator for today's session is Dr. Varsha Deshpande, ma'am. So she is a legal academic at the Department of Law at Dr. Ambedkar College, Diksha Bhumi, for the past 19 years. And her area of interests include constitutional law, jurisprudence, and gender issues. She is widely invited for delivering lectures on law at different law universities and colleges pan India. She was recently awarded the title of Law Guru, and the late Shri R.B. Pendharkar Professional Excellence Award was conferred on her for the proficiency in the law teaching by the High Court Bar Association, Nagpur. Welcome, ma'am, for the session. About our author, she is a journalist and author. Her first book, Manoj and Babli, explored the tough roads to justice for victims of honor killing. She has worked for various publications, including Outlook, Indian Express, Hindu, and Hindustan Times. She writes on politics, governance, defense, gender, and human rights. Welcome, ma'am. I will request Varsha ma'am to escort our author for today for the session. Before we start with the session, I would like to thank all our sponsoring partner and our main sponsor, Mahametro.
Well, thank you, Chanda, for that generous introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to this post-lunch session at the second day of this grand and glittering Vidarbha Literary Festival 2024. Friends, India won the 1965 and 1971 wars against Pakistan. All our soldiers who courageously fought on the borders, India was extremely proud of all of them. Soldiers who came back victorious, we were very proud. Some soldiers, sadly, sacrificed their life at the altar of the motherland. We grieved, no doubt, at their irreparable loss, yet India was very, very proud of these soldiers. However, ladies and gentlemen, there were some soldiers who equally courageously fought on the borders for India, and yet they were neither killed by the enemy nor did they return home. Some of these soldiers got suddenly disappeared into the enemy territory, and ever since their stories have remained unfinished and lingering. These were men in uniform who went missing in action, and they have till date never returned home, neither dead nor alive. Years after these wars were concluded, some reliable evidences from different sources kept trickling in, which were heavily suggestive that some of these soldiers could be still alive and in Pakistan's custody. What happened to these men? Were they really kept in Pakistan jails for years on end? Could they have been physically or mentally tortured by Pakistan? What was the trauma that the family members of these missing soldiers went through? And most importantly, why was India not successful in getting her soldiers back? These and many more such disquieting and uncomfortable questions are what the guest author of this afternoon, Chandrasuta Dogra, tries to tread into, tries to find answers to these difficult questions. Her book, Missing in Action, is a richly researched and a deeply and profoundly moving book that puts on paper harrowing stories of our missing Indian soldiers. Ladies and gentlemen, Missing in Action by Chandrasuta Dogra is precisely the book that is in conversation this afternoon. I once again welcome all of you to this afternoon session. Chandraji, as we kick off the conversation on this book, I would want to begin with one question for some kind of a conceptual clarity for the audience. So could you quickly touch upon what are these terms like prisoners of war, missing in action, that do find a frequent mention in your book? So for the clarity of the audience, could you quickly touch upon what do these terms really signify?
Thank you, Varsha, for that introduction, and extremely grateful to VLF for having me here today. Coming to your question, during war, there are, as all of you know, that a lot of people get killed, a lot of them get injured. So there are lists compiled of people killed in action, then people who are injured in action, and those who have been captured by the enemy and declared as such. For instance, during the 1971 war, Pakistan said, we have 616 POWs or prisoners of war. So the prisoners of war are those who have been declared as being captured and in enemy captivity. And according to the Geneva Conventions, the enemy nation has to repatriate them as soon as hostilities end and there are peace treaties, etc., which is generally done. In addition, there are a lot of soldiers whose bodies don't get found. For either they are in enemy captivity, but the enemy country has not declared them as being, they might have kept them as bargaining chips or for whatever purposes. And armies of most countries do try and keep captives, soldiers during conflict, whether it is war or any other kind of conflict, even from the borders. Sometimes soldiers stray across the border during peacetime operations, and when they go across, they are captured by the enemy country and kept quietly. So those come under the category of missing in action because their bodies they are not found, or it is, even if, let us assume, a body of a person is there in the enemy country. I mean, since we are talking mostly about the 1971 war, so let's just say Pakistan. And they are supposed to hand over the body or any other elements, for instance, the identity disc or their watch or whatever else they are wearing. But if none of that is forthcoming, then the person is put in the missing in action list. And in India, we don't have a missing in action category for administrative purposes.
We still don't have it?
I mean, now I think the time period has been extended to 1 year. For 1 year, the
okay,
government
so
if
for 1 year nothing is
yes.
found, then...
But during the 71 war, most of them were put under the killed in action list.
Right.
So that the benefits, pensionary, etc. could flow to the families as quickly as possible. But then there were other problems connected to it because a lot of people about whom proof came in later, that, in the form of letters or some sightings or some stories which repatriated spies brought, ki we saw so and so person in the prison, etc. When those kind of stories came in, then the problem with designating them as missing in action, believed killed. This is how the army categorizes them: believed killed, and that is how it is. But then there are problems associated with this categorization.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. I think that does set the tone of this conversation ahead. But there's one very pertinent question that I want to ask you, Chandarji, that, regarding this issue, what we've always read about or heard about is that, India released something like 93,000 prisoners of war to Pakistan. And more importantly, what is popularly talked about is that when India returned these 93,000 prisoners of war, India did not leverage this with the Pakistan establishment. But as I was reading through your book, I realized that your book somewhere lifts the veil on this matter. So could you tell us what is it that really happened?
This is an enduring question which we as children of army officers also, and even now in the civilian world also, you hear people saying, oh, well, the government gave away 93,000, actually 92,723 to be precise. But for the sake of convenience, the figure is rounded out to 93,000 prisoners, POWs. Now, they were prisoners of war, which India had, and most of them were people who were captured from East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. That is the Eastern Front. And a large number of them were civilians from the East Pakistani civilian administration. They were very senior officers like chief secretary, etc. And of course, there were a lot of army. There were women and children. There were sailors. So all kinds of people had been brought in and housed in various POW camps. But the popular, what the citizens of India thought is that we have so many POWs and we can leverage them with Pakistan to get something. One of the things which was discussed is a lasting solution to the Kashmir dispute.
Kashmir problem, that's
we
right.
could have done
That's
that.
right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and the popular perception is that they were just returned by the then government headed by Indira Gandhi. 5,000 square kilometers of area was also returned, and India didn't get anything in return. However, there was a deal, there was a back channel deal, and one needs to understand that wars are fought to achieve political goals. And for India at that time, the political goal was liberation of Bangladesh, and that its president Mujibur Rahman,
yeah.
should be released. He was under a death sentence in Miawali jail in Pakistan. So India wanted that Pakistan should free him and send him to Bangladesh, where he could take his rightful place as the president of Pakistan. Now, this was one goal, and the second was recognition of Bangladesh by the international community as well as by Pakistan, very critically by Pakistan. Everything else was secondary, because if this did not happen, then fighting a costly war in which thousands of soldiers were killed or injured, that would have been completely a waste.
Yeah, it would have been a useless activity.
And the then government would have had to suffer a huge embarrassment for doing that. So Indira Gandhi struck a back channel deal with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, in which it was decided that she would return these 93,000 POWs and secure the life of Mujibur Rahman in return, which Bhutto kept his word, and Mujibur Rahman was released and sent to Bangladesh. Before he reached Bangladesh, he stopped at New Delhi to thank Indira Gandhi and then went and took over charge. Now, at the same time, there was the question of 195 Pakistani officers who Bangladesh wanted to try for war crimes. We all know that the Pakistan army had unleashed great violence in East Pakistan at that time. There were huge massacres, and once Bangladesh got liberated, they wanted to take revenge. So they wanted to try these 195 Pakistani officers, many of them senior people, for war crimes, some kind of a Nuremberg kind of trial. And India was also in favor of that. But for Pakistan, it would have been really disastrous if all the other POWs came back and these 95 were held back. So the negotiations kept dragging on for almost till about 1973 or so, and beginning of 74. And finally, Pakistan recognized Bangladesh. So these 195, they were released in exchange for the recognition of Pakistan by Bangladesh. So Indira Gandhi achieved both her objectives and struck deals as against these POWs. We need to understand these things because a lot of this is not very well known in the public. Even within, the army, of course, doesn't know about it at all because army is not privy to these negotiations, which are held at the diplomatic level, at the political level. So it's a dark area. But I've tried to bring it out and bring it before the nation in some way.
Yeah, so this does bring on our minds some stories that have not really been popularly talked about in terms of understanding why as many as 93,000 prisoners of war were released by India. So thank you very much for that. As we move ahead, Chandarji, when I read through your book, there were points of time when it really became very difficult for me to continue reading those harrowing stories that you've so wonderfully discussed. Out of all these stories, one story that particularly hollowed my own heart was the story of Major Ashok Suri. Why don't you really yourself narrate that story to the audience?
It is a very moving story. Major Ashok Suri was the quartermaster of the 5th Battalion of the Assam Regiment. And he was taking a small convoy of 3 vehicles full of rations, equipment, etc. He was operating on the Western Front near the in Chamb area. So crossing the river, his jeep came under fire, and he was hit in the head and he died. He did not die immediately. He was taken to the advanced dressing station where he was treated a little, but by the time they took him to the hospital in Jodia, he was declared dead. And the next day, the war was still raging in that area because this was 5th of December. So he was cremated and that's it. But this is the official story.
So just a minute, if I could intervene. Was the war formally declared on the 5th of December?
No, the war started on the 3rd of December.
Okay.
When Pakistan attacked some posts then we retaliated with...
All right.
So 5th of December, the war was raging on both sides. But this story began to unravel soon after his father began to do a little investigation. His father received several telegrams from the AG's office, the government, and then one, I think, from the unit also, that one of them said that your son is wounded in action, and after a few days, 2-3 came that he was wounded in action, and then that he's dead. So his father suspected that probably things were not what they should be. He went to the unit's location in Jodia, close to Jodia, further ahead, close to the border. But he said, okay, if my son has died in action, and if he died taking that convoy of, so at least I want to meet the doctor who declared him dead. Please give me some of his, his items, his box, and whatever you can give me. Also show me where he was cremated. But the unit could not forward any evidence at all. So and on the contrary, the CO of that unit refused to meet him, which was again very odd, because generally, especially in infantry battalions, which this was, the officers and everyone is very, very respectful towards the family of a fallen soldier, and people treat them with great respect and dignity. But here it was the opposite. So this person went home with a very troubled mind. And he happened to be a very influential person. He was running a yoga center in Delhi, and he had clients ranging from even the president and then several diplomats. So he contacted all whatever contacts he had, and an American diplomat who had friends in Pakistan brought him this information that your son is well, he is wounded and in a hospital in Pakistan, and he's on the wounded list. So, and then this information was corroborated by 2, 3 other sources also told him that your son is actually wounded and otherwise he's fine. Then Suri Saab began more investigations, and sometime later the unit sent the box with some of his uniforms and other things, and there was great despondency in the family. Then sometime in 1974, he got a letter. He used to live in Faridabad, so a letter came to his house, and there was a small slip of paper in it which said, "I am okay here."
Yeah, so what we're displaying here is actually the picture of the actual letter that was received by Major Suri's father. So the two
I'll
letters
just
there.
read out that it was written, it bore the date 17/12/72, means roughly 1 year after the war. But it was an inland letter. It had some more lines written by one Muhammad Abdul Hamid. And that Abdul Hamid had apparently brought that letter and quietly slipped it in the Suri family home. It said, "Suri Saab, Walaikum Salam, I cannot meet you in person. Your son is alive and he is in Pakistan. I could only bring his slip, which I am sending to you, now going back to Pakistan." So everyone assumes that this was probably a spy who Ashok Suri might have struck up an acquaintance with in jail and tried to slip out some message for his parents. While they were just processing this and, very troubled, around 6 months later, another letter came. And that letter had 3 datelines, 14th, 15th, 16th June 1975, as if it had
I
taken...
think it is the letter down, the
Yeah.
second one. Yeah.
So there in that letter, what he writes, "Dear Daddy, Ashok touches thy feet to get a benediction." Now, I've seen some of the earlier letters which Ashok used to write to his parents, and he would always start his letter in this way: "Ashok touches thy feet to get a benediction." That was his standard way of greeting his father. "I'm quite okay here. Please try to contact the Indian government or Government of India about us. We are 20 officers here. Don't worry about me. Pay my regards to everybody at home, especially to mummy and grandfather. The Indian government can contact Pakistan government for our freedom. Your loving son, Ashok." So his brother, now of course his brother is also no more, Bharat. He told me, he said, "We used to hold the letter and smell it and touch it. My brother has touched it, and they were also sentimental about it." Then eventually the Suri family went to the government and said, "Listen, you have declared him as killed in action." The government was refusing to accept that this is all, the family is just making a noise. Then when they went with these letters, and there was some more information also which the army had through its own covert sources, finally in 1976, 5 years after the war, the Indian government wrote to the International Committee for Red Cross that we have made a mistake in the case of Major Suri. Please treat him as missing in action and see if he can be found. Now, 5 years after the war, who knows where or in what condition, and why would Pakistan admit to holding, because you're supposed to, immediately after the Shimla Agreement, you're supposed to have repatriated all the prisoners, which the ones which were declared, they came back in the first week of December 1972. So in 1976, who will admit that yes, we kept back this and the other 20 soldiers, 20 officers who Ashok has written about in his letter? Later on, Suri Saab also established contact with a person called Gilani. He was his childhood friend from Faisalabad because Suri Saab was originally from Sialkot and they had migrated during partition, so he had contact with some people. Now, Gilani had a relative in the Pakistan army, and through him he came to know again that Ashok was well, but he was on the injured list and he was in hospital somewhere there.
So this was roughly which year?
This was much later, again 77 or so.
Okay, all right.
1 year after that.
1 year after that, yeah.
So I'll just read out a little what Gilani's letter to him says. With regards to your son Major Suri, I have been able to dig out some information. Please note, he is well and healthy. His release, now this is very critical, his release at this moment is rather difficult for the reason that he was taken prisoner 1 day before the actual declaration of war, and all such prisoners are considered on both sides of the border as spies rather than POWs. So the thinking is that the story which 5 Assam brought out that he was shot and he was killed on 5th of December, possibly not true. He must have been tasked with a mission before the outbreak of hostilities and strayed across into Pakistan and was captured, which is something why the unit possibly did not want to admit that it had made a mistake and lost one officer because of whatever bungling happened. And this person, because he was captured a day before hostilities, so he was not categorized as a POW or a prisoner of war, but a security prisoner or a spy. And then a spy, now he says, unless both governments sit down and exchange spies, your son's release cannot come by. So my humble advice to you would be to approach your authorities and discuss this issue with them, of course, without mentioning your source of information, as it might involve my kin for leakage of such highly confidential information. I wish I could be of greater service to you, but you can understand my position and limitations. So this person tried to help him as much as he could, brought out some information, but obviously, as he's saying, there are limitations because all this was there with Mr. Suri, Dr. Suri, but unfortunately, whenever the government tried to broach this issue with Pakistan and say, for instance, I'll just take 1 minute and explain that there was a meeting in 1984, so many years after the war, because Dr. Suri and a whole lot of other relatives were pursuing the government relentlessly. वो MEA में रोज जाते थे हर बार, even the चौकीदार्स over there knew them. And finally, because of their persistence, the matter of missing prisoners was taken up at various levels, Prime Minister level, Foreign Secretary level, the ministers levels. So there was a meeting in 1984 between the two foreign secretaries, Pakistan and India's foreign secretaries, in Murree. And there, during the course of conversations, the Pakistan Foreign Secretary admitted, he said, yes, this list that you have given us, we don't have any POWs of this name. Now, obviously, these soldiers, the ones who have been retained, were not kept under the category of prisoners of war, but had been recategorized as security prisoners or spies. But he said, we have some security prisoners with similar sounding names. And then he went on to say, he says, but we will need reciprocal access to our Pakistani prisoners also, which you all might be holding. And that is where the matter died and the conversation moved on to other topics and it was never really followed up much. So this is one thing which, the MEA had declassified some of its records some years ago, and I took out from the minutes of that meeting, very clearly this is given, which we can figure out that yes, those people were there, their names might have been distorted a little, which always happens in jails after many years. Names are even sometimes changed. But if the person is saying we have similar sounding names, people, and they are in the category of security prisoners, that says quite a lot. But this person, Major Ashok Suri, despite all this evidence, has not come back.
Okay, so what I actually gather from all that you narrated about this story, I think they primarily look like two reasons. Number one is the erroneous categorization of Major Suri, that he was not really labeled as prisoner of war, and therefore probably the obligations under the Geneva Convention didn't really apply. And the second factor being that, after so many years, probably Pakistan did not want to come up with an admission that, okay, this is a person we've held for so many years, because of the embarrassment that it would cause. But then, having said all this, I really want to ask you this question, that why is it that India never really internationalized this issue of missing soldiers? Because we've never really read or heard about India approaching maybe the United Nations or the International Court of Justice with respect to them. So why was that so, according to you?
This is really critical, because everyone says that we should have gone to the United Nations, we should have taken this matter to International Court of Justice, it's a violation of the Geneva Conventions, etc. The most important reason why India does not take disputes with Pakistan before any international forum is the Shimla Agreement, which was signed on 2nd of July 1972. Now, the Shimla Agreement binds both nations to resolve all their disputes bilaterally without third-party mediation. Now, any kind of prisoner swap is rarely ever possible without third-party mediation of any sort. It could be a friendly third country, it could be an institution or an organization like the United Nations or anyone. But India had steadfastly, because India is always scared that if we take this issue to, let's assume, the United Nations Human Rights Commission, it might tempt Pakistan to take the Kashmir dispute to UN. And that will open up, scrutiny to a whole lot of inconvenient questions. And the fear of the bureaucracy has always been, and the political leadership, that by doing so, Pakistan might take away Kashmir from us, if it goes to the United Nations. So the Shimla Agreement is the stumbling factor, and I'll just read out from an affidavit which the government had produced, and it is a repetition of several affidavits. Whenever these cases went to the courts, the families took these cases to the court and said, ask the court's direction. Please direct the government to go to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. Please direct the court. So what the government would say is, this is from an affidavit submitted by Vivek Katju, then holding the Pakistan desk. It is submitted that the United Nations Human Rights Commission or any other agency would hardly have a role to play in the matter, as the Government of India is committed to resolve all matters with Pakistan on a bilateral basis without third-party mediation. So, in many ways, it may not be incorrect to say that these men were sacrificed at the altar of Kashmir in so many ways. Now you find the case of Captain Saurav Kalia. Saurav Kalia, as many of you would know, his body came back in a very badly mutilated condition during the initial days of the Kargil war. And his father till today is running around trying to get justice. And along with Saurav Kalia, there were many other Jawans also. So he has been knocking at the doors of the government, the MEA, the Defense Ministry, and finally has gone to the court. And there again, the response of the government is very clear that we will not take this case to the UNHRC because the Shimla Agreement is in place, and we don't want to open up any bilateral dispute to third-party mediation.
Yeah, so if I may quote your words from the book, you do say this, that our soldiers were indeed sacrificed at the shrine of bilateralism. The next question I want you to actually quickly answer, because I want the important issues to be covered within time. You do talk in your book about the family members of these missing soldiers getting very restless, trying to get access to Pakistan jails, in fact, for identifying their own men. So you do talk about 2 such visits that the family members did. Now, how are these visits different? And why did both of them prove unproductive? I want you to very quickly touch on this.
There were 2 visits. One was in 1983 and another one happened in 2007. Now, 1983 visit came about after there were peace talks and there was what should I say, consular access for about 500 prisoners was worked out. And so Narasimha Rao intervened and pushed that at least 6 families should also go along as the MEA officials are conducting the consular access of people who had been cleared for repatriation. So so before these people went, he told them that you go and get your men. They will be in a bad physical or mental condition. You may have to nurse them, but do so quietly without making it public. Now, when these 6 families heard this from Narasimha Rao, who was then the foreign minister, they felt that some kind of a deal had been worked out behind the scenes, that under the garb of consular access, some prisoners
Something would finally
would
work
be
out for
shown
them.
to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So they were very hopeful कि कुछ ना कुछ तो हुआ है. But when they went, they were first taken to Multan jail. And that was the only jail they were taken to, where consular access for 164 prisoners was happening, which is a routine kind of interaction. Because the Indian side, the diplomats will just, and at that time it was Ajit Doval who was doing this. He was there in Pakistan. So these people were cleared, and but when these 6 families went, they were taken to a group of people sitting in a courtyard, and some of them were looking mentally ill, some were not in a good condition. Then they were taken to another room where there were 8-10 people in a badly injured condition. उनकी किसी की टांग टूटी है, कोई प्लास्टर में है, कोई mentally ill है. They could make out, and they were terribly sad to see ki, what if our kin are in the same condition
Naturally,
somewhere
that is-
behind these walls, who knows. And Dr. Suri was lifting the chins of people to see, to try and figure out किसी की दाढ़ी है तो शायद मेरा बेटा तो नहीं है, trying to, kabhi he was laughing, kabhi he was crying. It was a very touching thing how these families described this event. But nothing much came out of it, because firstly, they were not shown any security prisoners, because those were the key, the real people who were supposed to have been shown to them. They were not shown any mentally ill people either, because if somebody has lost his mental balance, they would be in a mental hospital or, in some hospital. So, and then at the same time, there was a diplomatic ruffle between the 2 countries. India was criticizing, suddenly India started criticizing Pakistan for, there was a movement for restoration of democracy. They were holding protests, and India said, they should be allowed to speak. India demanded the release of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, at that time the Frontier Gandhi. So all these things were very unpleasant for Pakistan, and possibly the political leadership did it unthinkingly, as normal tit for tat in India-Pakistan relations happens, not realizing that it is jeopardizing this particular initiative. And India was also supposed to do a reciprocal access, show Pakistan embassy officials some Pakistan prisoners, security prisoners housed in Patiala jail. जो बात हुई थी, that was to show them 25 prisoners. But when the embassy officials went to Patiala jail, only 3 people were there, 3 prisoners. So that also was a bit of a betrayal, and then the Pakistani government just dropped the whole issue and refused to show these people anything else, and the visit ended in failure, and they came back very despondent. They tried to meet General Zia, who was the president at that time, but he also refused to meet them. So a lot of things. Then in 2005, when Musharraf was the president, so they wrote to him, the relatives, and tried to appeal to the soldier in him that you are a soldier, you understand how it is in war, etc. And
So there was a very emotional letter.
yes, a
I
very,
understand
very
that was
emotional letter
written to
which,
him.
which
Yeah.
they wrote to him. So, in response to that, Musharraf said, all right, we'll facilitate another visit to our jails. You come and see for yourself. So, in 2007, 14 families went, 14 family members, they went. They were taken to 10 jails. They were
So I
taken.
think this is the picture of those family members that
Yes,
had
yes. When just
visited.
before they left, and it was with A.K. Antony. A.K. Antony also gave them a briefing and told them, don't call them POWs, call them missing in action. Because POWs say Pakistan has a would probably get upset. Ki, why are you saying that we have POWs? Till today, we don't have POWs. We've returned all. But because they've been recategorized, they're not called POWs anymore. So you call them missing in
Missing in
action.
action, yeah.
And when these people were taken to various jails, but the first visit was very quiet, under the radar. No one from the media got to know. And but this was done in a blaze of publicity. Both the countries wanted to bring it out because such a visit had never happened anywhere in the world. So both the countries wanted the world to know that, look, this is what we are doing for the families, etc. But it was more of a PR exercise. They were taken to various jails, but it was just a very superficial kind of a visit. The records, for instance, they wanted to see the record. They were all in Urdu. There was no translator available. Then again, they were not taken to the military detention centers like Fort Attak and Chaklala. Those were the detention centers. They were not shown any mentally ill prisoners. They were not shown any in hospitals, etc. It was just a PR exercise, lot of media coverage, etc. And nothing much was expected when they went. But the families went thinking, okay, well, kuch visibility hoga, ho sakta hai. It might ring a bell with somebody and somebody might come up to us with some information. But unfortunately, that also didn't happen. And the two visits did take place, but did not yield anything significant.
Okay, I really don't want to miss out on one crucial question because I see it's already 2:44. So one important question that I want to ask you, Chandarji, is I want you to actually talk to all of us about the two Indian soldiers who remained in Pakistan jail for so many years and whom you've written about them, that they were indoctrinated by Pakistan. Could you tell us about that story as well?
Whenever prisoners are captured in any country, there is always an attempt made to turn them against their own country, and that they should work for the enemy country. And it's always done using, they'll generate some kind of a hatred for their own country and some kind of psychological exploitation. Now, there were two soldiers of 108 Engineer Regiment during the Kargil War from the Mashko sector who strayed across. One was Sipahi Jagsir Singh and another was Sapper Arif Muhammad. Now, they went across in 1999 and India just gave them up ki kahin chale gaye honge ya mar gaye honge or whatever. Bodies were not recovered, but just forgot about them. Sometime in 2002 or so, Arif Muhammad managed to smuggle a letter out, again through some repatriated prisoner, to his village that I am here in Pakistan jail. Excuse me. By that time, his wife had remarried and she was pregnant with the child of her second husband. And this came out in the media and it became a big story, and then there was pressure on the government to bring these two people back. So in 2005, formal repatriation took place. India released a person called Ali Shah, Salamat Ali Shah, who was from the Northern Light Infantry, whom India had kept during the Kargil War or even later. Again, like one of those people caught from the border and kept for such an occasion, maybe a possible swap. And here was a swap which was happening. And two other civilian prisoners, 3 were released and in exchange for these two. When these two came over from Wagah border, they were holding Qurans in their hand. And they were straight away taken to the military hospital in Amritsar. and kept under observation. So the intelligence officer, one Colonel Pathak, who was tasked with finding out what are these people, debriefing them, etc. He noticed that Jagsir Singh, a Sikh, was repeatedly doing namaz 5 times a day. He had been converted into a Muslim. And then these intelligence officers, they befriended these two soldiers over cups of tea, playing cards with them. And the whole story unraveled, that how they had been converted into spies and sent back. They had been tasked with opening civilian canteens near cantonments near the border, like Lalgarh Jatta, Bathinda, Firozpur, chote stations close to the border, open civilian canteens, gather intelligence, and the money to open those canteens was to come from intelligence officials in the Pakistan embassy in Delhi. And they were supposed to be doing this, and Pakistan had generated great hatred in their minds by telling them that, look, your country, India, has forgotten about you. आपके बारे में तो कोई पूछता भी नहीं है, and you're here very much alive, so which country? You work for us, we'll pay you and we'll do this. So these people did get convinced and were all set to execute their role as spies. But when the Indian intelligence came to know this reality, they suggested to the government that let's not punish them, let's rehabilitate them, take a humane approach. And that humane approach actually worked. They were sent back to their units to rejoin duty. This person, Jagsir Singh, later on, after he left the army, he joined the Punjab police and he became security guard to one of the ministers in Punjab. So they were brought back from the brink due to the good sense of our intelligence officers. But this story underlines what happens when people are in enemy custody for a longish period of time. And there are cases that whenever India has tried to say, we want to repatriate Pakistani soldiers, we want to send your back, you give us ours back, Pakistan refuses to take them for this very reason. Because they feel they must have been turned, we don't want these people. So Pakistani officials have told our Indian officials, we don't want our soldiers back. We have told their families that they are dead. So you also tell your families that their soldiers have died and don't bother us anymore. This is how it happens.
I think that this is really a very, very moving account of what the author writes in the book about soldiers who remain in custody like this for so many years. Chandraji, I could actually go on and on with questions. I do have so many of them still remaining, but to do justice to all our audience here, I think it's now the time for me to leave the forum open for all of you to put your questions to the author.
Can you shed some light on the Shimla Agreement, the history behind Shimla Agreement, why these terms were put in, or the bilateral thing, and why third-party intervention was not allowed, something, and why was it signed basically?
See, the Shimla Agreement was signed as a peace treaty immediately after the war, a few months after the war. And the matter of POWs, the matter of 93,000 POWs, most of which were from the eastern side, this was discussed. Not these missing people, but that. And then it was decided to return some territory also. 5,000 square kilometers of territory was returned. Now, one of the reasons why in the talks it was decided that yes, these prisoners, it was just in principle it was decided that obviously you have to return because these are declared and they come under the Geneva Conventions. But their repatriation got delayed for a very long time, etc. And the matter of why bilateral. Now, this was something which happened between both the leaders, that is Indira Gandhi and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. India wanted a lasting solution to the Kashmir dispute, but the perception is that Bhutto fooled us by saying that I cannot go back to, after losing a war, I cannot go back and tell the people that now I am also going to agree to give them Kashmir. So we'll do a step by step. the LOC will be there, and that will finally get cemented after a few years, and we will recognize that as the border. But as we all know, that it never happened, and the LOC continues to be the LOC. And it was Bhutto who persuaded India that okay, we will solve all our and for Pakistan, solving disputes bilaterally was only lip service, because within 1 year of signing the Shimla Agreement, they violated this bilateral treaty. They went to the International Court of Justice for their 195 officers and said ki wo alag baat hai ki the case was dismissed over there, and later on India also agreed to release them because Pakistan. So a lot of things happened at that time, which some are clear, some are not so clear.
We'll take one last question, please.
This also is in relation to the Shimla Agreement. In 1971 war, we had a military victory, but we had a political loss.
Absolutely. Now, during the Shimla Agreement, there was no military representative sitting during the discussions. And this is something which the military leadership has always resented, that why was one of our representative not there? It was certainly a political, the give and take was all politics. Otherwise, if there was a military rep, they would have never agreed to return the territory, the captured territory. So yes, I agree. But then at the end of the day, like I said earlier, right in the beginning, wars are fought for political goals. And our political leadership has those goals in mind, and the military becomes secondary over there.
I think, does anybody else have a question? I guess we could take one more question with 6 minutes remaining.
My name is Ashok Karandikar. My question, ma'am, is that when a person is killed in war, his families receive a lot of compensation. What happens in the case of people who are declared missing in action?
That's a wonderful question. I was hoping somebody would ask that. If somebody is, like for instance, these people, if somebody is missing in action, they should be treated as being on duty for a reasonable period of time. And now, of course, I think the time period, earlier it was 6 months, then it became 1 year, then it went back to being 6 months. But to come to these 54 people, Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, the hero of the Bangladesh war, he was so sad at seeing these people knocking on various doors. So he finally approached the Gujarat High Court and told them that look at the absurdity that every year the defense minister gets up in parliament and says that hamare 54 prisoners, now it has become 83 because some peacetime disappearances have also got clubbed, Pakistan ki hirasat mein hain. So if they are with Pakistan, then you have to treat them as being on duty because you believe that they are alive. So the court agreed with that and told the government that please give them areas of salary, please give them notional promotions. So if somebody was a captain in 1971, he should become a major, a lieutenant colonel as normal time scale promotions. So all these people were given promotions, their families were given areas of salary, and all that happened in 2013. So you can imagine it took a court directive to get the government to do something which was so visible, which should have happened automatically, which you don't need anyone else to do it for you. But this is, yes, one of the infirmities of our system. Again, because, there's this other thing which I said right in the beginning, that we don't have a category of missing in action for administrative purposes. So a lot of these people were put under the killed in action category and given away. But you also have their memorials in various places. You have given them posthumous bravery awards. But you keep getting up in parliament and saying ki they are in Pakistan.
Yeah, so that's
this contradiction.
A great contradiction. Yeah. So now the family members do get salaries after the intervention of the Gujarat High Court?
Till the normal age of retirement.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I'm sure there could be so many questions and the discussion could go on and on. But since it's time now, we really have to stop here. But before we end this session, for all of you in the audience, please do make sure that you get your copy of this wonderfully written book, Missing in Action. Chandrasuta Dogra, the guest author for today, thank you very much for joining us at this session. Thank you very much for gracing VLF with your presence and for this truly engaging session. To each and every one of you in the audience, a big thank you from the bottom of my heart for having chosen to be a part of this session here. You were a wonderful audience. Thank you very much. With this, I draw the curtains on this afternoon session at the VLF. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha ma'am, for this lovely moderation, and Chandra ma'am for this lovely book that you have written. I hope so all will, enjoy reading this book. And also, though the book is named Missing in Action, but I guess we need a lot of action so that these stories are not repeated in future. Now, with not much of an ado, but a small token of thank you for Chandra ma'am, I would request Vivek Deshpande sir to please come up and hand over this token. So this is a monument of Nagpur, historical monument of Nagpur, which is beautifully, taken and given. And we also have a goodie bag for Varsha ma'am. So Vivek sir, please. This will be a unique thing when Vivek sir will be presenting it to Varsha. Thank you so much, all of you.